but I literally announced my retirement on the Sunday, and then the Monday went into the office for the first time. Every morning, 6 days a week, I was up at 5:30. This time when I touched the wall, it was like, I've done everything that I can. Like literally everything anyone's asked me, I've put everything on the line. It was just so many coffees. I started work. I didn't know what all these people do in these buildings in the city because I've never experienced it before.
Does it feel like, hey, I'll say champion of the world to give it a Rocky Balboa sort of sense, but I was champion of the world. Just coming in then at this sort of entry level, how does that make you feel?
My task, this is what I'm putting energy into straight away. It may not be perfect, but I'm doing something, I'm learning something, I'm moving in a direction.
Mack, look, welcome to the show. It's great to have you join me tonight on the Second Wind Academy podcast to chat about your career transition, indeed your perspective on how you've gone from world-class swimmer to essentially what you're up to today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. And it's actually good to chat. We were talking time zones randomly, like a good Brit and a good Aussie, chatting about the time and the weather. And it's quite a
classic
nice
small talk. Classic small talk.
There you go. Well, that was it. And it's actually good just for many people. I seem to be speaking when we are all over the world, so it's quite good for us to be speaking relatively next door from an Australian perspective between Sydney and Melbourne.
It is good. Easier for you as well. I'm sure you would do some early mornings and late nights. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I do. You know what? The good thing is I tend to be meeting people like yourself, interesting stories, and sort of very quickly manage to find a nice rhythm and chemistry of, just chatting and seeing what's going on. So looking forward to stepping into a bit more with you tonight.
Yet to be determined if my story is interesting, but we'll.
We're going to loop back at the end. That's it. This is a new poll that we're going to put out with this show. Rate of level of interest, something like that. Well, look, Mack, what I love to do is just kick off with give us an introduction as to who you are and essentially what you're up to today.
Who am I? I'm Mack Horton. I was an Australian swimmer or on the Australian swim team for almost a decade, swam for 17 years of my life. Retired coming up on a year ago now. So I think probably still early days in the scheme of transitioning. And currently I'm working at Clemenger BBDO which is like a creative ad agency here in Melbourne. It's the first job I've ever had. I never had a hospitality job. I never delivered the mail, which, it's not lost on me how much of a privilege that is to be able to do that. But I don't think that makes the first job in the real world very easy. So that's me, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Oh, listen, that's absolutely brilliant. It's great to chat to you so early into what must be an interesting career transition for you. And as you say, this being your first job. So I have to ask then, so what was day one like?
Completely overwhelming. For some reason, the timing worked out. I can't remember if it was by design or if it was like a subconscious thing that I had done just to like cleanly step in from one chapter to the next. But I literally announced my retirement on the Sunday, and then the Monday went into the office for the first time. And I remember actually going in for my first day, and I was riding my bike into work, and I had to pull over halfway there to do like a radio interview because it was still like overhang from the announcement the day prior, and I was like, this is not a normal first day of work. But yeah, it's an overwhelming experience, which I don't know. 12 months down the track seems weird to say now because you get so used to the office environment. But at the
Yeah.
time, it's just like a place I'd never really experienced.
Yeah. I bet. But do you know what's actually a simple question I want to ask now? Typically, for those 17 years of you being a top level swimmer, wouldn't you? Well, did you swim pretty much every morning?
Every morning, well, 6 days a week, I was up
Yeah.
at 5:30. Yeah, early starts every single day.
So what day were you waking up? What were you doing on that first week? How were those mornings during that first week?
Um, I'm trying to remember what I did. It took me a while to figure out the rhythm, but
Mm,
I think exercise is always going to be a big part of my life, and it's like I'm addicted to exercise. It makes me feel good,
mhm.
and I'm also used to setting up my day in exactly the same way, like
Yeah.
to the minute almost. For 17 years, I set my day up the same way.
Yeah.
Um, so to then go into the the working world, the 9 to 5, and I'm learning now that you can have a rhythm and a routine,
Mhm.
but it's blown up day one essentially, and you have to figure out what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I kind of like probably just mishmashed some exercise throughout the week and did, I don't know, a gym and a run and maybe a little swim or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
it takes some getting used to.
Yeah, I bet. Well, yeah. Well, I'll say I know as I think back to it what that rhythm is like. But for it being quite so short for you between at least that public announcement and it happening. So before we sort of step into that process, what is well, what's your role right now? So you say it's in a creative ad agency. Means a lot to me, but what is it? What does your day look like, or what's your role, should I say?
So I'm a business manager, which is essentially client services. So the contact point or the conduit between the client and the agency. Any problem, issue, brief, task that they need solved or pushed through the agency comes to me. I have to figure out how to get it through. And then it's essentially project managing that through the agency and getting it back out the other end. So it could be a bit of creative work, strategy work, might be like a production job. All of that sits within us, and you have dozens of jobs, projects on the go at the same time across a couple of clients. So
Yeah.
um, it's full on.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can imagine it is. Having been, I've only ever been, I guess, on in terms of um, that marketing side, if I put it in that broad sense. I've only ever been on client side, so I'm here and I'm thinking, yep, first job ever, coming straight from athlete. Limited, I'm going to say swimming, sorry, loads of swimming experience, limited
Yeah.
experience in sort of the agency side. That's a really full on job to step into. Um, how are you finding it at this moment?
Uh, well, at this moment it's December, so I'm hanging on till the end of the year. If I'm being completely honest,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I think it started out. I started out so hungry. I
Mm,
think I'm an all in. That's not so. It sounds like when I'm saying I started out so hungry, it sounds like I'm not hungry anymore. I'm still hungry,
hmm.
but it was, being an athlete, I'm kind of like an all in guy. And so day one, I walked in and it was just like, give me as much as you can, essentially. It's like you actually have to learn how everything
Yes.
operates and runs before you get to that point. So it was a gradual build, probably, I reckon, for 6 or 7 months. And then all of a sudden, it hit the third quarter, fourth quarter of the year, and it's just chaos.
Yes. Yeah.
Which has been good. It's been fun. It's been really hard as well. Um, I think the hardest bit probably is finding boundaries, like around work and who you are.
Hmm.
Um, I think when I was swimming, I was a swimmer, but still not defined by being a swimmer, and there was still felt like there was lots of time and space and life outside of the sport, if that made sense. You do train for six,
Well,
7 hours a day.
look, it does
Uh,
make sense, but it isn't something that I hear very often on the show. So, because what you're describing is, whilst you were a swimmer, a top swimmer, you actually saw life outside of, well, the pool and that black line.
Yeah, and I like it probably depends how you define that life, but for me, it was like space for my brain to just process and think and
Mm.
do its own thing.
Yeah.
And when you fill your day with work, you don't have space for any of that,
Mm.
which is really interesting because you take on the mental load of so many different little tasks.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but then it's also other things like, I was training for morning and afternoon, but I'm home all day, get to see my partner. She's a shift worker. So it's like we probably spent more time together when I was a professional athlete than now when I'm actually working,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which is also a tricky change.
Yes, it is. Yeah, there's a lot, and we often talk, and here we are talking very much about that career transition or that shift, but that lifestyle that sits around being an athlete to then coming into a more traditional workforce, there is that whole lifestyle shift that happens as well, and it does impact, as you're saying, relationships with partners, with loved ones.
Yeah. And I think, it's been a year of change in terms of me taking on this job.
Mm.
We also were living in a different state last year, so we moved state, which is a pretty big deal in Australia because it's a long way. So
Yeah,
there's lots of things that just kind of accumulate. It just feels
yeah,
like chaos and the real world, I guess, because I think being an athlete, you're partly sheltered from the
mm,
real world because your job as an athlete is to shelter yourself and protect your space, and you have people around you to do that as well.
yeah. And well, look, I'm going to pull us back a bit and talk about you being an athlete. Like you say, you had that as a job, which is something I want to step into, and then we can come back into how you perhaps structured or didn't structure, or how structured or unstructured that transition was for you, and then delving a little bit more of how you're bringing that into your, let's say, into your current role and lifestyle. So, you talk about this career as a swimmer. If you take us back, when did you start to realize you were good at swimming?
Um, I don't know if there's like a clear point. I think my earliest memory of enjoying swimming slash being good at swimming, they kind of go hand in hand. Is just like chasing big kids in squads, and I remember just like going to training, just like I'm going to chase down the big kids and sit on their feet and like be probably a little bit of a nuisance, but I love to just be the younger one, the smaller one, and be a bit of an underdog and go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Um, and I think that like energy and that mentality just kind of like pushed me through all the squads because I don't know if you remember when you're swimming, but it's like what's the next squad you move up into and progress, and you
mhm,
just kind of keep going until you qualify for a states or a nationals and or
yeah.
make it all the way. Um, so yeah, no clear point, but I just remember that mentality of like I like to fight and push myself as hard as I can here.
Mm, yeah. No, I like that, and I know what you mean. For it's wanting to be with the big boys. It's wanting to be, and like you say, hanging on to their feet gave you that. I guess it wasn't necessarily a push. I suppose it literally pulled you along.
Yeah, pulled me along, but I don't think it was ever to beat them. It was just I wanted to push myself as hard as I could, and that the easiest way to do that or test myself was against them.
I like that. You even just in that you talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to there's a competitive edge and drive that kicks in, but there is something there about being the best that you can be, and it's like you were challenging yourself to keep up with them rather than trying to beat them in the pool.
Yeah, and I think this is something I don't want to say cracked, but like figured out kind of pretty early on. Um, was that you can waste so much energy thinking about what other people are doing, trying to beat them, when really you should be pushing all your energy towards yourself and being like, how can I be the best version of me
Mhm.
that is probably more likely to end up beating them anyway. So it's like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, you just push yourself as far as you can, and the net result is generally pretty good.
And so for you, with that, with I guess with that mantra, was it or how linear then was it for you going from that sort of local pool into those national competitions?
I wished I remembered more of it. Years of not enough sleep has probably destroyed my memory, but it fit
Yeah,
like when I reflect on it, it feels pretty linear and steep. Like it felt
yeah,
like it happened pretty quickly.
hmm,
But I think in reality, it was like 5 or 6 years. Um, but I remember like, almost ticking off a different step each year, like
yeah,
qualifying for a states, and then it's like a state
mhm,
final the next year,
yeah,
and then the next year it's like qualifying for nationals, and then a national final. Um, and I remember it because I think when I was younger, I probably got a bit nervous, and it was like every time I ticked off that next step, every step below felt not as overwhelming, and so that's
mhm,
why I was conscious of the steps, because like once you've done that one, the
yeah,
previous one feels fine, and so once you've had pushed your experience a little bit further,
yeah, yeah.
you can handle a bit more.
Yes, yeah. Those sort of micro steps, micro goals in some respects. But I also get a sense you're not coming across as setting that right. I'm making nationals this year. Boom, this is it. I'm all in for that. You strike me as more, hey, this is all good. I'm swimming here. Hey, yeah, I qualified. It's great.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think it probably comes back to like I just loved being in the water and I loved
Yeah,
pushing myself, and that's
yeah,
why I was motivated to do it.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, there's definitely bits of I want to swim fast and I want to beat these people.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think that maybe like the best example is when I was 11 or 12, I was trying to figure out like what the best pathway to success or national success, whatever the best pathway there.
yeah,
And so I printed out the age group records for the 1500 for 12, 13, 14, all the way up to 18.
yeah,
And I don't know how across Australian swimming you are, but it was Kieran Perkins, Grant
yeah,
Hackett,
yeah,
distance grades.
yeah.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
World champion.
And I stuck it above my bed.
Yeah,
So every night before I went to bed, I'd see
yeah,
that. Every morning I'd wake up, I'd see that.
hmm,
And each year it was like, I want to try and knock that name off.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and it's not because I wanted to beat them. It was just like, this, you're on a path. And
Hmm.
this is, if you can follow this path as well
Yeah.
as you can and get as close as you can, you'll be in a good place.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Do you know, to an extent, I can relate to that because I know as I look back on people I've perhaps played against and competed against in my own journey, I barely remember who it was because what I remember was, oh yeah, this is your challenge. The next game is this level. This is who you got to mark someone who does X, Y, Z. It's like, yeah, I don't care about that. Oh, this is the challenge. Great. And I was all about that focus and achieving that piece, much less about, in some respects, where it might take me or indeed might not
Yeah.
take me. It was much more about that
It's
challenge.
like it's like they're there to facilitate you challenging yourself, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. They're a tool for you to push yourself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. That's good. That's good. Well, so whilst you're in the water, becoming obsessed with training, what was what was happening from an educational and academic perspective?
Still in school, survived it just. Yeah, yeah, it was never the priority, and I don't I. I don't know. I don't know how it would have gone at school if it was the priority, to be honest. Because swimming consumed so much of my life that it never had its chance.
Mm,
Year 12, I remember I missed, I think it was about 12 weeks of curriculum because I was overseas at the Commonwealth Games,
yeah.
and then came back and had to cram, almost a whole term before exams. So it wasn't ideal, but I got through it. But
Yeah, yeah.
in saying this, I do remember making a conscious decision that like now is my chance with
Mm.
swimming. Like
Mhm.
I can come back and learn later.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
terms of like physicality, um, this is the window that I have
Mhm.
to push
Mhm.
if I want to do the swimming thing. And I remember having quite a like frank conversation with the school and my parents. Everyone sat down and we said, like, what are you doing? Um,
Mhm.
Not as in what are you doing because we think you're on the wrong path. What are you doing because we want to help you?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like, wow.
yeah,
Okay. You don't think you're
yeah,
going to make it, Mac? This isn't going to.
yeah. No, no, no. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, I said I'm going with swimming. Like I'm giving it a good
Mm.
crack, but I'm
Yeah.
still like I'm getting through school, so please help me. Um, and they were great. Had great teachers in my corner, and they kind
Mhm.
of just pushed me through, did whatever they could. I remember at school actually because I was so tired all the time. I would fall asleep most classes, and they'd have to wake me up, or I would
Yeah. Yeah.
like end up under a desk sleeping,
Mhm.
or if I had spare periods I would just go find a couch and just fall asleep. Like it was the point where I would take, if I could get 3 minutes of sleep I would take it and set an
Wow.
alarm.
Yeah.
Like I was
Wow.
that
Okay. That's
tired.
exhaustion. Yeah. Well, that's amazing I mean, to actually get through it and to, so whilst doing that, you were still able to perform where you, as you did. It sounds like, again, you managed to, well, the great thing that you've said there is you had the conversation. So you had that conversation that brought the parties together who could support you to get you at least through year 12, get you through 18. Um, as you then left school, what did you hope to become then?
As I left school I think I felt freed, like the because I was still all in on swimming, and
Hmm.
so it was just like I'm just going for swimming. But just the time that leaving school gave me, and the energy and the ability to rest was just
Mm.
like just helped me accelerate.
Yeah,
Um, and so that was amazing, and that was 2 years out from Rio where I won. So it was like almost
yeah,
perfect timing. Just like here's
hmm
2 years uninterrupted. Just go for swimming.
yeah,
Um, in saying that though, I think all the way through there was always a bit of my brain that was like swimming is not forever, so you need to have a backup plan. You need to at least be
yeah.
doing something else.
What do you think?
Um,
What brought that thought?
I think my parents probably told me I had to have a backup plan. One, but then I think there's so many examples of athletes that don't have backup plans, and
Hmm.
I grew up in a time where you see it on your phone, on the news, whatever. Like
Yeah.
it's everywhere, so
Hmm.
it's not hard to miss. Um, and so yeah, with a little bit of awareness, it's
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
this is just what you have to do. And I think I mean, growing up, you see people get injuries, get sick. It's like you could blow your shoulder tomorrow, and that could be it.
Hmm. Yeah. And look, for you, that 2 year stint, you were able to go all in on swimming. Um, Before we get to the sort of the outcome of that, whilst you had that thought in the back of your mind, oh, I need a backup plan. I need to be doing something else. What did you do?
I tried 3 universities. So I did know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I probably still
Yeah.
don't, to be
Hmm.
honest.
Hmm. I'm still
So I was
looking
like,
too. So that's all.
yeah,
But yeah.
I think everyone's looking. I think we're all faking it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, anyway, I was like, I'll go do a business degree. Kind of applies to most things. It's general enough. I'll
Yeah.
keep learning. It was just, it took me a while to find the formula that worked in terms of like online day student, that sort of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, Cracked it with the third university, and then just kind of worked my way through it over
Well,
8 years.
yeah, so over 8 years, but you managed to find the formula. Just tell me then, what was that formula?
Well, I think I started all online, which I think was probably like early day, potentially just a
Mm.
bit too early for online university. Like they hadn't quite nailed how the curriculum's delivered and the
Yeah.
engagement.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I probably didn't have enough drive as well at that point to push through it. And then I went to like 50-50. So
Hmm.
day student for a couple of lectures, subjects, whatever it
Modules.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then online for others. But that was around the time I won the Olympics. And so it was like pretty uncomfortable, to be honest, going to uni.
Y-
And then,
That mix was the wrong mix. It's like, oh, hold on. Yeah. No, just focus. How many interviews and all sorts would have been.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was very strange.
Great time.
So that didn't last long. And then I tried a different university that had, worked through the online
Mhm.
learning and it was in a better place.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd kind of come to the resolution myself that like this, I have to get through it in this version
Yeah.
because the other version doesn't work.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And look, fascinating. It really is for me to hear it because work with different athletes as I do and always looking for what rhythm suits who and why and how. And look, there isn't a cookie cutter approach. And what is interesting, at least as I listen to you and reflect back on that, is yeah, you actually just kept trying and you were figuring out which one worked best. You didn't just say, oh, well, that didn't work. Never mind. Uh, no solution.
Would have been nice.
Might have made things even easier, but well, as we'll
Well,
come to,
maybe. I don't know. Long
yeah,
term, probably not. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, well, that's it. And look. I mean, just stepping into that, you mentioned there the Olympics. You know, being at the Com Games as a school aged swimmer, getting then to the Olympics and having some success. What was probably the biggest highlight for you as you look back now on your swimming career?
This is always such a hard question
Mm.
because it's
Yeah, and I've heard you answer it different ways across different conversations, so it's even better.
okay. Well, we'll see what we'll get tonight. I think my answer at the moment, and it's probably reflective of where I am in life and my career, is it's none of the accolades or the medals or the dice, whatever.
Mhm.
It's it's being part of the team, experiencing all those friendships and those relationships um, with coaches, with support staff, with other athletes.
Mhm.
Um, they're the highlights for me. All those like just very weird moments that only you or that team and no other group of people will ever experience ever.
Mm.
Um, for me, that's the special bit because I mean, people can go and win medals, but no one will ever be able to have those experiences ever again.
Yeah, yeah, very true. Well, that's it's poetic, but it's also great. It's great to hear that because those, like you say, those accolades, they will definitely stay. They'll stay with you, and um, but it's those, like you say, those almost personal memories. It's being with that team. It's building that spirit, and like you say, it's having the bits that probably none of us have seen, and you know, I for one certainly, but we won't witness that either.
Yeah, I always think so fondly of the my roomie. So for many years, I roomed with Zach Stublety Cook,
Yeah.
won the 200 breast in Tokyo. But we, when you go away on a trip, you room together for 3 or 4 weeks pre-competition, and then
Mm.
2 weeks of the competition. So you end up being together for almost 2 months. Um, and it's just chaos. It's two guys in a room in two single beds. The moment you move in, you just flip all the furniture, figure out the way that it's going to work. You unpack everything. You got the coffee set up in that corner. You got,
Yeah.
whatever. There's just
Yeah.
stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you get into a competition week and you're both racing and sleeping at different times, eating at different times, and you're like
Mm.
ships in the night, but it
Yeah.
somehow works. And because Zach was very into his coffee, the room just always had a very distinct smell. It's just like, I just miss that feeling of walking in after a hard day. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
how the result is. We're both wrecked. End of the
Yeah.
8 day comp, and you just,
Mhm.
how you going?
Yeah. That is good. That's brilliant. Yeah. No, and look, listening to that, it's certainly something. I suppose now as you're coming out of that period, it's going to be very difficult to replicate.
Yeah, I don't think it's never going to happen again.
Mm.
I mean, there's potentially like experiences at work if you're pushing for a deadline or
Mm.
something where no one else will get to experience and you get to build a connection with someone.
Yeah.
Um, but I just don't think it's ever going to be as deep or as
Mhm.
impactful as those moments. I could be wrong. I'd be happy to be wrong, but
Yeah.
I think it's just it's such an extreme circumstance to be one of 38 people representing a country. Like, it's,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, well, you see, this is the bit that's quite special. Is whilst as you talk about that office working together on a tight deadline on a project piece, that to an extent is okay. The projects are different, but is replicated in many other creative agencies, client firms, etc. Many people will go, "Oh yeah, yeah, I remember this, I remember that." But there's such a very small percentage of individuals who have that Olympic, that sporting, that elite, that team mentality and that intensity. So yeah, the situation and the description is very similar, but there is, I guess, something quite special about being well at the top of the game, being elite, considering, hey, we're doing this, but we're also the best at this as well, or amongst the best.
Yeah. And I think there's the experience is filled with contrast as well, because there is, we are very good at it. There's a perception that we're the best in the world, and I think we are pretty close.
Mhm. Yeah,
But then you still got to go and do washing or whatever, or miss a bus, and it's an hour and a half late. And those
yeah.
moments are the funny bits as well.
Still in your early 20s, there's still a lot that's going to go wrong. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
everything goes wrong.
I missed the bus. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, look, with that, and so I'm keen then to think. So as your sort of that's your sporting career, swimming career continued to, like you said, you're in the national team. You're at the top of the game. At what point did you realize, okay, this is going to stop, and you could almost put a date or at least a time scale on it?
I think there's probably two bits in there. The "this is going to stop" thought I
Hmm.
had all the way through,
Yeah.
which is the doing something else as a backup, having a safety net. But then I remember there consciously being thoughts of like, when it does stop, I still want to love swimming, 'cause I've always
Mm.
loved it. It's given so much to me. I never wanted to get to a point where I resented it, because I think a lot of people leave sport, um, and they feel burnt and they won't go back to it.
Cynical. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I didn't want that to be me. And then in terms of when that was going to happen, I think that was probably always up in the air. You In Olympic sport, you think very much in Olympic cycles.
Yeah.
Um, so you get through the Rio cycle, then it's like, all right, well, are we going to Tokyo? Or are we not? Like, you're committing to 4 years, and then you get through Tokyo. And it's like, are we going to Paris? Are we not?
Yeah.
Again, thinking in 4 years, and for me, it was always, I'm seeing through Paris, and then that's probably it. I'll be 28,
Hmm.
3 Olympics. That's enough,
Hmm.
and the body will be pretty ruined by then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, which that's not what happened. So,
So
ended up,
best laid plans. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so much of a plan that we, signed the lease on the house on the Gold Coast where we were living and training through
Mhm.
to the end of Paris.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, you just go full steam ahead at that
Well, yeah,
plan.
you got to commit, right? You commit yourself. You're committing everything to it. So.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I think it's cliche to say, and you hear so many athletes say it, but when you know, you know. Um, and for me, it was relatively obvious. I missed the team in 20. I can't remember the years now. 2023, I
Yeah.
reckon.
Yeah.
Missed the team for the first time in 9
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Um, and every other time I've touched the wall and haven't had a result or whatever that I was
Mhm.
after, there's been clarity. It's like, okay, well, that's what you could have done better. That's what you need to go and improve on. And I'm
Yeah.
motivated to go and do that.
Mhm.
And this time when I touched the wall, it was like, I've done everything that I can, like literally everything anyone's asked me. I've
Mhm.
put everything on the line.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do anymore to, to see a gain.
Yeah.
And
How
so it was,
come? How come on that occasion? How come it was so different?
I think because I, I think maybe it's just like after a decade, or well, 17 years,
Mm.
you have tried like so many plays in the book to say, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're aware of all the levers that you can pull.
Mhm.
And I just felt like I'd pulled every single lever. Um, and there was no more to pull on.
Mm.
In saying that though, like if it was just train for the rest of your life because you love it and you
Yeah.
can get paid to do it, go for it. But
Mhm.
to go through that and then have to, be exposed competing on the world stage or whatever, it's
Mhm.
like if you're not heading in the right direction, do you want to keep putting yourself through that? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I guess I mean, ultimately, there's a financial implication of not making the team.
yep.
And so, as you were, I don't know, well, was it as you hauled yourself out of the water after that race, or was it a couple of days later? What started to drop to be, all right, yeah, okay, now we're doing it.
As I remember like walking around on pool deck after the race and just like sobbing, which
Mm.
I cry very rarely, incredibly rarely. Um, and I don't know that no decision was made, but it
Hmm.
was just like this feeling like maybe that was it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
hmm,
and that hit hard because you have a plan, and I love
yeah,
the sport, and I would do it forever if
mhm,
I could.
yeah,
But it just felt like for some reason that was it, and I knew.
mm, yeah. So, what did you do?
Um, what did I do? I kept swimming.
Yeah.
um, I reckon I didn't touch the water for maybe a week or two, but then I kept going to training
Hmm.
5 times a week, which is
Yeah.
less than the usual 9 or 10.
Hmm.
Um, because it is what I'm used to. It's what I love. It made me feel good. Gives me
Yeah.
space to think.
Hmm.
And I also wanted to leave the door open in case anything changed. So
Yeah.
it was like straddle that fence for as long as possible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, which I think is probably secondary to the first point. The first being I loved it and it gave
Yeah.
me space and
Hmm.
structure and it's what I
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah. Yeah. So, w- how did you then? How did you get a job? Because I mean, as simple as that. How did you get a job? Did you have a CV? Were you on LinkedIn? Were you, what happened?
On LinkedIn, it's horrendous. It's still horrendous. I hate it. I I had a CV, but I had to have a friend help me because I never had to write one before.
So I'm like, okay, thinking. I know it's not that long ago, really, but what was on your CV?
Um, I've been involved in like the swimming leadership group, so
Yeah.
stuff
Okay.
like that. The
Yeah.
Swimmers Association,
Hmm.
some volunteer work I'd done, charities I've been involved in,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, that sort of stuff, but no work experience.
Mhm. No. No. Yeah, which is good. You see, now I think for a lot of athletes, well, not just athletes, as I even work with executives, and CVs can be this really challenging sort of. You get writer's block. So I haven't done anything that's relevant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
if I didn't have a friend helping me, I don't know that
yeah,
I ever would have got there. And
yeah,
that was the person that helped me. Probably they did the right thing in putting too much in there. Like
mhm,
tried to really pump me up so that I could go, okay, no, that's realistic and that's realistic, and I
Yeah.
feel comfortable with that, which I
Hmm.
think is easier than going the other way where you have to build yourself up, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's good. It's good for someone else to stroke your ego rather than you be like,
Yeah,
I've done all of these things. Like,
yeah, well, exactly.
yeah. But but you asked a friend. I'm guessing a friend who was already in the world of work in some shape or form, and they helped to shape it, give it that structure for you.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of like finding a job,
Mm.
uh, it was just so many coffees.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
up until I started work, I didn't know what all these people do in these buildings in the city because I've never experienced it before. And
No.
so it was like, okay, well, how do you find out? You just go and talk to them and see what their day to day is like, what they enjoy
Yes.
about work, what they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Um, Different industry, like I just spoke to everyone that I could.
So what you've just described there is absolutely fantastic. It's more. How did you know? How did you know to do that?
Um, I don't know how I knew to do that. I don't know if someone told me or if it was. I think maybe it's like curiosity because
Mm.
the the question mark is very much what do you want to do? And it's like, okay, well,
Mm.
I don't know, but I have to get some reference from
Yeah.
somewhere because I
Yeah.
have no frame point.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think like I'm in a pretty fortunate position where like if I ask to have coffee with someone, generally they will at least reply,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
which
Yeah.
is
Yeah. That's right.
it's very helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
who was that first? Well, who were the first few with? I mean, some of these I'm guessing was parents, friends, um, this type of thing, and then it must have started getting to randoms. Just like
lots of randoms,
yeah,
genuinely lots of randoms.
yeah,
I can't remember who the first one was. I
mhm,
reckon the first one would have been a random. I actually think I
yeah,
skipped over like parents' friends, and it was like someone was like, "Oh, I'll introduce you to this person," and I was like,
yeah,
"Okay, sure." And
right,
then, as you know, every time you meet someone, they will introduce you to two or three more people, and it just
yeah,
kind of
hmm,
snowballs.
that's right, yeah,
Um, and then, as you start to build that frame and
mm,
perspective around, okay, that's what they do in that industry. That's what I want to explore that more.
yeah,
Then it's like just cold messaging people and being like, "Hey, can we grab coffee?"
yeah, yeah. You got in.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. You actually got to that point. Are we? Is this a sort of? Are you now a LinkedIn stalker? Was it like, hey, see this, grab a coffee?
Yeah, probably. I don't know what the like how you're meant to do it on LinkedIn, but I'll just search people and message them or whatever.
Mark, that's exactly what you're supposed to do on LinkedIn. That's
Well, I
absolutely
don't know. You see everyone commenting and like,
yeah. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, they sound interesting. Hey,
I do it in the shadows. I do it in the messaging, not on the comments.
yeah, yeah. No, that well, it is. It's the good side in many respects of LinkedIn is that outreach. It is so open that the challenges, and it's one of those bits I'm really interested in is that inspiration to at least reach out to someone in the first place and say, oh, well, why reach out to them? Is it about the industry, the company, the role, their background? What was it for you?
um, I think I think all along, I every person I've met, it's always been like, what can I learn? What is the takeaway? Like there is no one that doesn't have anything to add to your life.
Mhm.
And so I've always believed in that. Every experience, every relationship. Um, that's not to say that every relationship is sustaining, but from every experience, you can take something or learn something.
Yes.
So I think if you think that that sits underneath this, like happy to just reach out and have a chat to
Mhm.
someone, then it maybe makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'm with you. It's you're led there by that relationship, that connection, and that sort of love of learning, which again is something that we hear or that I come across a lot. Speak with athletes is that love of learning, usually as a route to mastery. Mastering something, you're open, you're like a sponge, and that's certainly sounds like that was the journey you began. at what point did it start to narrow into the into, I guess, a creative industry?
Um, I think pretty early on, I figured out I wanted it to be something that produced something tangible. Um, so
Hmm.
we're helping make something, or that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I always enjoyed the creative and strategic side of whatever I was doing.
Hmm.
And I had a friend that probably pointed me in the direction of creative advertising.
Yeah,
And I don't think it's something I'd ever considered, to be honest, until they pointed me in that direction. And then it was just like, go have more coffees and find
yeah.
out. Yeah.
Well, I guess in many respects you didn't know it existed until
Yeah.
those coffees took you down
Yeah.
that path, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
and then I'm guessing it was figuring out, well, what roles are you eligible for?
Yep. What roles am I eligible for? What sort of level? Um, Figuring out which agency I wanted to be at as
Mhm.
well, and
Tell me
going
more
pretty
about that.
well. I think as I was having coffees, you figure out the lay of the land, I guess, in Melbourne advertising,
Yeah.
um, and everyone has stories from different places, and I don't know. It's like a big four consulting firm. Each has its own characteristics and
Mm.
what have you. Um, and yeah, I just figured out the one that I wanted to go with and went for it.
Yeah. Well, which is great. And, we're chatting here now and you clearly got it. Was it and I guess technical, I'm trying to figure out the order here. Did you apply for a role, or was it go and speak to that person and then they said, oh, we're thinking you'd work. You should come and meet this
Um, it was a pretty blatant ask for a role, to be honest.
guy. Hey, what do you want? I'll have a long black. Have you got any jobs? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which I don't know if that's how you meant to do it, but
Usually let them at least have a sip on the cappuccino,
yeah,
or
yeah.
you just straight piccolo. I'll just keep this short and sweet and jump
No,
straight in.
the best thing that they did for me was they said, come in and shadow with us for 3 days,
Mhm.
um, and that was like the insight I needed into more so what the day to day looks like and feels
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
Um, and I didn't have that understanding that I had from that experience on anything else. Yeah.
Hmm. So I mean, that's brilliant. That, I guess, you found an environment where they're prepared to take a chance, and they
Yeah.
were able to look at you as you are as a person and think, yeah, okay, let's give this a go.
Yeah. And I think like that shadowing experience is like, that's not so far removed from the coffees. It's not like
Mm.
I I don't think people should be afraid to ask for it, because you're not doing anything, you're not taking anything, you're
Mm.
just there as an observer.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so I think, yeah, that was one of the better things that I did.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, you just kept going. You had the coffees, and it sounds like you were eventually had that confidence to be quite forthright in it. And did you have to go through and that interview process for you as well? First time.
I haven't. Well, no formal interview. I still haven't
Yeah,
done a formal interview. Yeah.
that's it. We catch up in a few years when they say we need you to apply for this job. You're like, what? Yeah, okay, put the tie on and go for
Yeah.
it. Let's see where that one goes.
Good
Now,
luck to
so
me.
yeah, so in your role today, we touched on it a bit earlier. What types of projects then are you working on? And the question I really want to know is, did you even know that existed 12 months ago?
um, did I know it existed? Probably not.
Huh.
Like, I don't know. You think of ads and advertising, and you think of really big campaigns and TV
Yeah.
ads and out
Hmm.
of home.
Hi, it's Ryan Gonsalves here. Thanks for tuning in today. I just want to take a moment to ask you an important favor. To help grow this channel, one thing will do that above more than anything else. Please hit that subscribe button. By hitting that subscribe button, you help me to grow the channel, allowing me to create more tailored content, improving the quality, and also to develop additional services such as the workshops, one-on-one sessions specifically designed to support elite athletes in that difficult transition to that career beyond sport. So if you want to join me on this journey to help inspire, guide, and connect individuals to find their second wind, please hit that subscribe button.
But there's lots of other little things that move through the agency.
Yeah.
And I think probably because of the nature of the level that I'm at, I probably touch more of the little things and assist on the big things, which is what you have to do. You have to figure out how the process works. And I think, they're probably more enjoyable because you're trusted more, you're able to take on more ownership. So often I think those smaller things are a bit more meaningful and a bit more fun because of the ownership, you then have the ability to build the relationships with the people and
Yeah. To what extent does it feel like a come down for you in asking in that way? Does it feel like, hey, I'll say champion of the world to give it a Rocky Balboa sort of sense, but I was champion of the world. Does coming in then at this sort of entry level, how does that make you feel?
I think it makes me feel fine. I don't think I can understand how it would be discombobulating for a lot of people. But I think all along, I was always aware that whatever is next is starting quite low.
Yeah.
And I'm, the thing I loved about swimming and sport is the process, building the foundation, and you kind of layer on top of that. So I'm aware that, like, if I was to jump a few levels or whatever, like, that's when you get into trouble. And I'd, I'm happy to master this and then take on whatever the next thing is. Yeah, it's just the name of the game.
Yeah, and so earlier you spoke about putting the times of the fastest in the country up, above your bed as that sort of those are the markers of that's how good I can be. That's
Have
kind
I
of
done it for work?
yeah. Well, have you done it for work? Is there equivalent of that?
No, there isn't yet. And now I'm trying to think about why there isn't. Probably because I think sport is so linear. I still feel like the working world is much less linear and much harder to plot a path. I might be wrong, but I just haven't, like, that path hasn't become clear to me yet.
And so without that path being clear, which is, well, I'll say probably for the first time for a very long time in your life, the path isn't clear, as in, and it'd be, oh, I win Olympic gold and great, that's the path. Without that path sort of mapped out for you or listed out, how does that change the way you operate?
I think it probably doesn't change too much because, like, 99% of what I did as an athlete was in the day-to-day and the process, and the fact that it was a linear path is probably just like a learning lesson that if you can spend your energy and your focus in the process, it will end up progressing, if that makes sense. And so I think if you carry that over to work, it's like lean into the process and the day-to-day and mastering all the little bits that you can. And I just believe that it will kind of take shape because of the experience that I've had previously.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. Who knows?
We'll find out. We'll check in. I'll drop you a note again in a few months and say, so what's happening? Well, look, a couple last questions for me, really. One is for you, for your rhythm. How have you found your rhythm now in terms of your day, and in particular exercise or health?
Uh, I think my rhythm's in a good place now. Like it's just finding a new routine and like
Mm.
almost setting some rules. So I have like, I have to hit 3 gyms a week and then 2 cardios, and they're either swims or runs or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that, the 3 gym is the foundation. My cycle to work every day is also part of that
Yeah.
foundation. And as long as I tick off like a certain amount, I
Mm.
know I'm in a pretty good place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the hardest bit is that work can probably like follow you everywhere, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's figuring out when to switch off, figuring out what to prioritize,
Yeah.
and what's important. Um, and I think, when I was swimming, I like to think I had like quite a holistic view. It was like, if you can be the best partner, the best friend, the best
Mhm.
eater, the best sleeper, you'll be the
Yeah.
best swimmer. Like
Mhm. Yeah.
do everything really well and practice every little element as
Yeah.
best you can.
Mm.
And I think from my experience and watching people at work, it's hard to remember that, because you're just like, I'm just going to be the best worker. But the reality is, you can't just be the best worker. You have to be the best parent and partner and
Mhm.
whatever to
Yeah.
then be the best worker.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That the mix. Well, I guess the priority in some respects shifts in terms of what's important to quite simply fill your bucket throughout the day. Um, so, look, last question really is: you're going to have people listening, really thinking to themselves, as an athlete today, you know, how are they going to be able to best set themselves up so that so that the day they retire, the following day they start their new career? um, Perhaps not necessarily quite so well on the surface smooth, but based on your experience, what guidance would you give to those athletes looking to set themselves up best for their sort of second wind in career?
I think during your career, it's always having just a little bit of an eye on whatever else is going on, if internally, externally, thinking about what else is out there, and just an awareness that it will end one day, which is probably easier said than done. Sorry. Particularly when you're in that sporting world and that athlete mentality.
Mm.
And then I think the best thing I did was actually retiring on the Sunday and starting on the Monday, because it, I don't know, if there was a period of time where I was like, what am I doing? Trying to figure it out, blah, blah, blah. I'd get a bit lost and maybe overwhelmed. And so I think by going straight in, it was like, all right, well, this is my task. This is what I'm putting energy into straight
Yeah.
away.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be perfect, but I'm doing something, I'm learning something, I'm moving in a direction. Um, Obviously, that's easier said than done to also line up the retirement with the job. But I think
Yeah.
the message there is it doesn't have to be perfect, but just do something and you'll figure out pretty quickly if it is or if it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can pivot.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, look, Mack, thank you very much for sharing your journey, bringing a bit of your perspective, especially great to speak to you so soon into your career transition. We're going to have to do a Mac revisited in a few years' time to see where we're at.
5 years or something. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, yeah, listen, thanks again for taking your time out today. Absolutely brilliant. Thanks.
Absolutely. Pleasure.